The sun beat down hard on the Dakota Territory in 1875, painting the wide-open sky in shades of dusty blue. It was a wild land, full of quiet dangers and even quieter beauty. Here, among the tall grasses and rolling hills, lived a cowboy named Luke. He wasn't a loud man, nor one to seek trouble. Instead, he moved with the gentle grace of someone who understood the land and its creatures. Luke spent most of his days on horseback, a lone figure against the vast horizon. His horse, an old bay named Dusty, was more than just an animal. He was a trusted friend. Luke had a special way with horses. He could calm a wild Mustang with a soft word and a gentle hand, and Dusty would follow him anywhere, even without a rope. Their days were filled with the simple rhythm of the range, checking cattle, mending fences, and watching the world wake up and go to sleep. His face was weathered by sun and wind, making him look a bit older than his 25 years. But his eyes, a clear shade of blue, held a kindness that softened his rugged features. He carried a worn saddlebag, a rifle, and a quiet strength that was often overlooked. While other cowboys might spend their evenings in rowdy saloons, Luke preferred the company of a crackling campfire and the distant howls of coyotes. He often thought about the future of this changing land where settlers were pushing further west and the old ways were slowly fading. He wished for peace, though he knew the territory was far from it. He understood that sometimes even the quietest men had to stand up for what was right, especially when trouble came knocking. One afternoon, Luke rode into the small frontier town of Willow Creek, a place he usually avoided. It was dusty and cramped, a stark contrast to the open plains he called home. He needed to buy supplies, flour, coffee, and some new rope. As he dismounted Dusty outside the general store, a tense quiet hung in the air, like before a summer storm. People moved quickly, their eyes darting nervously. A loud crash from the saloon caught his attention, followed by boisterous laughter and yelling. A group of soldiers, about half a dozen of them, stumbled out onto the boardwalk. Their uniforms were rumpled, and their faces were red from too much whiskey. They swaggered, pushing past townsfolk, making crude jokes that echoed in the strained silence. One soldier, bigger than the rest, tripped and nearly fell, roaring with drunken amusement. His friends slapped him on the back, encouraging his unruly behavior. The air grew thick with unspoken fear. Shopkeepers pulled their curtains tighter, and women hurried their children indoors. The soldiers, feeling their power, seemed to enjoy the fear they caused. They loudly boasted about battles fought and Indians chased, their words slurred and ugly. Luke watched from the shadow of the general store's porch, his blue eyes narrowed. He disliked bullies, especially those who used their uniforms to scare others. He just wanted to get his supplies and leave. But a knot of unease began to tighten in his gut. This was the kind of trouble he usually stayed away from. But sometimes, trouble found you, no matter how quiet you tried to be. And today, it felt like trouble was looking for a fight. Luke was about to step into the general store when a small, swift movement caught his eye. A young Cheyenne girl, no older than 10, darted from a narrow alleyway between two buildings. Her buckskin dress was faded and her long braids swung as she ran. Her eyes, wide and dark, held a look of pure fright. She seemed to be searching for someone, her gaze quickly scanning the street, but her family was nowhere in sight. Perhaps she had wandered off, or been sent on an errand and lost her way in the commotion. Before she could find shelter or disappear into the crowd, the drunken soldiers spotted her. Their loud talk stopped, replaced by an ugly silence, then a chorus of jeers. "Look what we have here, boys," one of them slurred, pointing a shaky finger. The big soldier, the one who had nearly fallen, grinned a wide, unpleasant grin. He stumbled towards her, blocking her path. The girl froze, her small body trembling. She tried to step around him, but another soldier moved to cut her off. Fear turned her eyes into dark pools. She was trapped, surrounded by the towering, laughing men. They began to poke at her with their fingers, making fun of her clothes and her braids. One even tried to grab a feather from her hair. She let out a small, choked cry like a frightened bird. Luke felt a cold anger building in his chest. His hand instinctively went to the rifle on his saddle, but he knew drawing a weapon would only make things worse. He had to think fast. The soldiers' cruel laughter filled the street, and no one else dared to help. Luke couldn't stand by and watch. The girl's terrified cry cut through him. Without a second thought, he stepped forward, leaving the shadows of the general store. His voice, usually quiet, now rang out with a clear, firm tone that cut through the soldiers' drunken laughter. "Leave her be," he said, his eyes fixed on the biggest soldier. The soldiers stopped, surprised by his sudden appearance. They turned to face him, their smiles fading into confused scowls. "Well, well, what do we have here?" The big soldier sneered, taking a wobbly step toward Luke. "Some dusty cowboy think he's a hero?" Luke didn't back down. He stood his ground, his arms loose at his sides, but his posture showed he meant business. "She's just a child," he stated, his voice calm but firm. "You're scaring her." The little girl, Ayanna, had quickly moved behind Luke, clinging to his leg, finding a shield in his tall frame. The soldiers exchanged glances, their drunken courage turning into annoyance. "Mind your own business, cowboy," another soldier growled, taking a step closer. "This ain't got nothing to do with you." "It does when you're picking on someone who can't defend herself," Luke replied, his gaze unwavering. He knew he was outnumbered, and he knew these men were dangerous. But the look of fear in Ayanna's eyes had made his choice for him. His quiet nature hid a fierce sense of right and wrong, and he would not let them hurt the child. He took a small step forward, placing himself fully between the girl and the angry soldiers. The tension in the street grew thicker, a silent challenge hanging in the dusty air. Luke's brave words only made the soldiers angrier. The big soldier, his face now a mask of rage, lunged forward. Luke, quick for a cowboy, managed to push Ayanna further behind him, but he couldn't dodge all of them. Another soldier grabbed him from behind, pinning his arms. Luke struggled, twisting and kicking, but the whiskey had made the soldiers fearless and strong. They hit him, hard, and he stumbled. Ayanna cried out, a small, heartbroken sound. "You think you can stand up to the army, cowboy?" The big soldier roared, his voice thick with fury. "We'll teach you a lesson." They dragged Luke roughly across the dusty street, past the frightened townsfolk who watched from their windows, too scared to help. Luke could feel the rough hands on him, the kicks to his legs. He fought until his breath was short, and his head swam. They pulled him to a sturdy wooden post, used for tying up horses, right in the middle of the town square. With practiced movements, they bound his wrists tightly behind the post with thick rope, making sure he couldn't move. Ayanna, still crying, tried to run to him, but a soldier roughly pushed her away. She fell to the dirt, watching with wide, tear-filled eyes as Luke was made helpless. The soldiers laughed, a cruel, triumphant sound. 50 lashes, boys," the big soldier yelled, pulling a heavy whip from his belt. "For daring to get in our way." Luke looked at the little girl one last time, his heart aching. He knew what was coming, and he knew it would be bad. But he didn't regret helping her, not for a second. The first crack of the whip echoed through Willow Creek, sharp and brutal. It tore through Luke's shirt, ripping skin beneath, sending a shock of fire through his back. He gasped, his body tensing against the rope, but he made no sound. The big soldier, his eyes gleaming with cruel satisfaction, raised the whip again, and again. Each lash was a searing pain, a fresh wound added to the last. Luke's teeth clenched so tight his jaw ached. He focused on a distant point, a hawk circling high in the endless sky, trying to push the agony away. He thought of Ayanna, her frightened eyes, and a stubborn resolve hardened within him. He would not give them the satisfaction of hearing him cry out. He would not break. His back soon felt like a raw, burning mess. Blood seeped through his torn shirt, staining the wooden post a dark red. The soldiers counted out each lash, their voices growing louder and more confident with every strike. 20, 30. Luke's vision blurred. He swayed on his feet, held upright only by the ropes biting into his wrists. His breath came in ragged gasps, each one a struggle. By 40 lashes the world spun. He could dimly hear Ayanna's cries, a soft, heartbroken sound that spurred him on. He held on to that sound, letting it be his anchor in the sea of pain. His body screamed for him to give up, to fall, to beg. But his mind, fueled by a quiet dignity, refused. He stood, barely, a testament to his unbreakable spirit. When the 50th lash finally struck, a blinding, searing blow, Luke's body slumped, barely conscious, but still standing. He had endured. Unseen by the drunken soldiers, a lone figure watched from the edge of town, hidden by a cluster of cottonwood trees. This was Chief Red Elk, Ayanna's father, a man known for his wisdom and strength. He had come to Willow Creek to trade, bringing Ayanna with him, but they had become separated in the busy market. His heart had pounded with fear when he saw his daughter cornered by the loud soldiers. He gripped the reins of his horse, his face grim. He was ready to ride in, ready to fight. But then he saw Luke. He watched the cowboy step forward, a white man defending a Cheyenne girl against his own kind. He saw the fury in the soldiers' faces and the quiet courage in Luke's eyes. He saw the cruel whipping begin, lash after terrible lash. Each strike of the whip was like a blow to Chief Red Elk's own spirit. He watched Luke's body twitch with pain, saw the blood bloom on his back. But what truly held his gaze was the cowboy's silence, his refusal to cry out. This man, a stranger, was enduring such suffering for a child he didn't even know. This was not a common man. This was a man of honor, a man with a warrior's heart, even without a warrior's garb. Chief Red Elk felt a deep respect grow within him, pushing aside his anger at the soldiers. He saw not just pain, but immense courage and a selfless sacrifice. A plan began to form in his mind, one that would honor this brave act in a way no one would expect. When the last lash fell, the soldiers, tired of their cruel sport, spat on Luke's slumped form. "That'll teach you to interfere, cowboy," the big soldier yelled, his voice hoarse. They untied him, letting his limp body drop to the dusty ground. With a final round of harsh laughter, they swaggered back towards the saloon, leaving Luke for dead in the fading afternoon light. The townsfolk remained hidden, too afraid to offer aid. Ayanna, who had been crying silently, now ran to Luke, kneeling beside him. Her small hands hovered over his bleeding back, not knowing what to do. She whimpered, tears still streaming down her face. As soon as the soldiers were out of sight, a group of silent figures emerged from the shadows. Chief Red Elk, with two of his strongest warriors, moved with purpose. Their moccasins made no sound on the dirt street. They quickly reached Luke, their faces serious. Chief Red Elk knelt beside the cowboy, gently checking for a pulse. It was weak, but it was there. "He lives," the chief said, his voice a low rumble. He looked at Ayanna, who clung to Luke's hand. "He is a brave one." The warriors carefully lifted Luke's heavy, unconscious body. They were strong, and they moved with a quiet efficiency. They carried him away from the silent, fearful town, past the general store where Dusty still waited patiently, and towards the edge of the plains. They placed him gently on a travois, a kind of sled pulled by a horse made for carrying injured people. Ayanna rode beside him, her small hand resting on his arm, a silent guardian in the growing twilight. The town of Willow Creek with its fearful secrets was left behind, fading into the distance as they rode towards the open land. Days later, Luke slowly awoke in a warm, soft bed, not in his own sparse cabin, but in a strange, cozy lodge filled with the smell of herbs and smoke. His back throbbed, a dull, constant ache, but the burning fire was gone. Ayanna sat by his side, gently tending to his wounds with poultices made from plants. Her quiet care was a balm to his battered body. When Luke was strong enough to sit up, Chief Red Elk entered the lodge. His face was serious, his eyes deep and knowing. He sat opposite Luke, and Ayanna moved to sit by her father. "White man," the chief began, his voice calm, "you showed great courage. You protected my daughter, Ayanna, when others turned away. You suffered for her, and you did not cry out." Luke tried to speak, but the chief raised a hand. "I watched. I saw your spirit. It is a good spirit." There was no anger in his voice, no hint of the vengeance Luke might have expected. Instead, the chief spoke words that surprised Luke more than any whip. "For your honor, for your sacrifice, I offer you a sacred pact. My daughter, Ayanna, will be your wife." Luke's eyes widened. A marriage pact? With the daughter of a Cheyenne chief? He was a simple cowboy, a white man. This was an offer of peace, yes, a great honor, but it was also a future he had never imagined. It was a bridge between two worlds, built on his pain and her father's wisdom. The silence stretched, heavy with the weight of the chief's unexpected proposal. Luke stared at Chief Red Elk, then at Ayanna, who sat quietly beside her father, her eyes downcast. His mind, still fuzzy from pain and strong Cheyenne medicines, struggled to make sense of the chief's words. A wife? He, Luke, a lone cowboy, to marry the daughter of a powerful chief? It was a dizzying thought, so far from his simple life of cattle and open plains. He felt weak, not just from his wounds, but from the sheer weight of the decision. His future, which had always been as wide and free as the prairie, suddenly felt very narrow, yet also impossibly vast. What did he know of marriage? What did he know of the Cheyenne ways? He respected them, yes, but could he live among them? Could he be a husband to Ayanna, a man of two worlds? "Chief," Luke managed to rasp, his voice still hoarse. I don't know what to say. It is a great honor, but—" He trailed off, unsure how to voice his deep uncertainty. He was a white man, and the world was changing fast. There was often bad blood between white settlers and the native tribes. Could such a marriage truly bring peace? Or would it only bring more trouble to Ayanna and her people? He looked at the young girl, who was now a young woman in his eyes. She was beautiful, with her dark braids and calm demeanor, but she was a stranger. His heart felt heavy with questions. He had faced down drunken soldiers without fear, but this offer, this path, felt much more daunting. He had to consider everything, his own life, Ayanna's, and the deep differences between their peoples. The chief watched him, patient and wise, understanding the struggle in Luke's eyes. Despite his unspoken questions, Luke could not deny the tender care he received. Ayanna, who had been a frightened child just days ago, now moved around him with a quiet strength. She was shy, rarely speaking directly to him at first, but her actions spoke volumes. Each morning, she would bring fresh water cooled by the morning air and gently clean his wounds. Her small hands were surprisingly deft as she changed the herbal poultices on his back, mixing plants he'd never seen into a soothing paste. She had learned these healing ways from her grandmother, a wise woman among her people. Ayanna would hum soft Cheyenne songs as she worked, and the music, along with the calming scent of the herbs, helped ease Luke's pain. She taught him about the properties of each leaf and root, the willow bark for pain, the yarrow to stop bleeding, the wild mint for comfort. She spoke softly, her voice a gentle murmur, explaining how the earth provided all they needed for healing. Luke, still weak, would watch her, fascinated. He saw a deep well of kindness and knowledge in her quiet demeanor. Sometimes she would bring him broth made from wild game, patiently helping him drink when his hands were too shaky. There were long stretches of silence between them, but they were not awkward silences. They were filled with understanding, with the quiet exchange of gratitude and care. Through the long, slow days of his recovery, as his raw wounds slowly began to knit together, Luke began to see Ayanna not just as the girl he had protected or the chief's daughter, but as a gentle, capable healer who was helping him reclaim his strength, body, and spirit. As Luke grew stronger, he moved from his bed to sit by the fire in the lodge, a quiet observer of Cheyenne life. He listened to the stories told by Chief Red Elk, tales of the ancestors and the spirits of the land. He watched the women prepare food, their movements graceful and swift, and the men craft tools and weapons with careful hands. Ayanna, no longer so shy, would often sit with him, explaining the meanings behind the songs, the reasons for certain rituals, and the importance of every animal and plant to her people. He learned about the buffalo, not just as food, but as a sacred gift, providing everything from shelter to clothing. He saw the deep respect they held for the earth, taking only what they needed and wasting nothing. He learned that generosity was a great virtue, and that strength was not just about fighting, but about wisdom and patience. His own past life as a cowboy, while simple, seemed to lack the rich tapestry of meaning he found here. He began to understand why the chief had offered him a marriage pact. It wasn't just about Ayanna, but about bringing two worlds closer, showing that a white man could live with honor among the Cheyenne. The chief's quiet lessons and Ayanna's gentle explanations began to chip away at Luke's earlier doubts. He saw a way of life that was deeply connected, respectful, and wise. What had once felt foreign slowly became familiar, and with familiarity came a profound respect for their traditions and their enduring spirit. He started to see the beauty in their customs and the strength in their unity. The days turned into weeks, and as Luke's body healed, so too did his heart. The quiet respect he felt for Ayanna grew into something deeper. They spent hours together, sometimes talking, sometimes simply existing in comfortable silence. He would share stories of his life on the range, of the vastness of the prairie and the wild horses he'd tamed. She would tell him of her people's ancient legends, of the spirits in the wind and the lessons learned from the animals. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery colors, they sat by the river. Ayanna pointed out constellations, telling him their Cheyenne names and the stories tied to them. Luke, in turn, showed her how to spot the North Star, a guide for travelers. Their hands brushed as she leaned closer to see, and a spark, gentle yet clear, passed between them. He saw her strength in the way she carried water, in her steady hands as she mended clothes, and in her quiet wisdom. She saw his kindness, his unwavering honesty, and the deep courage that had led him to protect her. There was a shared understanding that went beyond words, a recognition of good spirits in each other. They had both faced hardship and injustice, and this shared resilience became a quiet foundation for their growing bond. The uncertainty Luke had felt about the marriage pact slowly began to fade, replaced by a sense of peace and a gentle pull towards this woman who had healed him body and soul. He found himself looking forward to their quiet moments, feeling a warmth he hadn't known before. The quiet affection that had bloomed between Luke and Ayanna deepened, slowly, steadily, like a river finding its path. It wasn't a sudden fiery passion, but a love built on something far stronger, shared sacrifice, and a profound mutual respect. Luke had given his body to protect her, and she had given her healing hands and gentle spirit to mend him. Their bond was forged in pain and sealed by kindness. He saw the world differently now, through her eyes and the eyes of her people. He understood that peace was not just the absence of war, but the presence of understanding, of honoring differences, and of finding common ground. Ayanna, in turn, saw past Luke's white skin and cowboy ways to the honorable man beneath, the one who would stand up for what was right, no matter the cost. She admired his quiet strength and the way he listened with his heart. One clear morning, as they watched the sunrise paint the plains, Luke turned to Ayanna. "I want to honor your father's pact," he said, his voice low but firm. "I want to be your husband, Ayanna." Her eyes, bright like the morning star, met his. A soft smile touched her lips. "I would be honored, Luke," she replied, her voice a gentle whisper. In that moment, surrounded by the vast, peaceful land, they knew their love was a testament. It was proof that two different people, from different worlds, could come together. It showed that, through great pain and brave choices, a new kind of peace could be found, a peace that started with two hearts learning to beat as one. The wedding was not like any Luke had ever seen. It was held under the vast open sky, with the sun as their witness and the wind carrying the blessings of the ancestors. Chief Red Elk stood tall and proud, his eyes filled with a quiet joy as he brought Luke and Ayanna together. The Cheyenne people, dressed in their finest clothes, gathered around, their faces reflecting hope and acceptance. Luke, now fully recovered and wearing simple buckskin gifted to him, stood beside Ayanna. She was radiant, her hair adorned with feathers and her dress embroidered with colorful beads. Their hands were joined, and Chief Red Elk spoke of the two rivers flowing into one, of the strength found when different paths merge. He spoke of Luke's courage, of Ayana's gentle spirit, and of the new beginning their union represented. Their marriage was more than just two people joining. It was a powerful symbol in a land often torn by conflict. It showed that peace was not just a dream, but something real, something that could be built with sacrifice, honor, and love. Luke, the quiet cowboy, had found a new home, a new family, and a purpose far greater than he had ever imagined. He looked at Ayana, his wife, and saw a future filled with hope. Her smile was a promise, and his heart, once solitary, now beat in harmony with hers. Together they stood at the dawn of a new era, two souls united, forging a path of peace in the heart of the Dakota Territory. The pain he had endured had paved the way for a profound honor, and in their shared love, two worlds had truly found a way to live as one.